Hi, and welcome to the Shift Show. This is Tamra Blankenship, and I have with me Shawn McBride. I'm going to have him introduce himself, and we're going to briefly go into a topic about gun violence and gun laws and some really great information around the way guns are being used today in our society.
Hi, I'm Shawn McBride. Most relevant probably to today's discussion is I'm an attorney by training. I'm licensed in 12 states and Washington, D.C., so I'm always kind of up on what's going on in the legal system in the world out there. And I spend my time working with businesses and business owners in various different issues relating to their planning and execution, which puts me into a lot of different arenas, a lot of different interesting stuff. And things like gun laws come up in owning a business, because what do you do with your employees? What do you do with your customers in gun laws? So it's always an interesting area. But it's something it's a difficult area because we have constitutional rights overlaying state rights, overlaying people's fundamental values and beliefs. So it's an interesting topic to get into, and I think it's one that we're looking forward to exploring with you over a series of time.
Great, thank you. And I'm, of course, going to always discuss more of the emotional aspects, how we participate and how we are unwilling to observe our own personal experiences as we start to deal with some of these processes of unfiltered emotion, for lack of a better term. So let's begin. Recently, there's been an increase of a lot of criminal behavior as far as shootings and violence within schools and in workplace environments. You know, they're everywhere across shopping and other locations where people are using rage to control their experience. So what do you think is the real reason why people are going around expressing it this way?
I think a lot of people feel like they just don't have an avenue, right? They have a complaint, they have an issue, and they just don't feel like they have an avenue. So when we look at some of the shootings that have happened, you know, for instance, the YouTube shooting, which happened recently, the lady felt like she didn't have an audience with YouTube. She was upset about the revenue. She was upset about how it was going. And I'm guessing she felt like she couldn't be heard at YouTube. And we see the same thing in some of these school shootings. It tends to be the kids or young adults that perpetrate these felt like they were isolated. They couldn't talk to other people. That seems to be a common thread when we look through a lot of these school shootings, is the person felt like they weren't connected to everybody else and they couldn't communicate. So I think what we're seeing probably is a society is shifting here, and we're moving to an online world. And you look at, some people have 5,000 friends on Facebook, right? They keep hitting their friends limit and they have to keep filtering their friends list. And there's other people that have 20 friends. And so the people that have 20 friends feel like there's something wrong with them, or they're different, or they don't have an audience to speak the same way the other people do. And I think part of this digital world is now we're starting to get this have and have not, and this comparison. There's been a lot of articles about the comparisons in the world, right? That so many people are comparing themselves to each other based on their vacations on social media, based on their number of friends, based on their cars. We're seeing comparison.
Body image.
Yeah. It forces everybody to think that whatever they have, it's not enough, because nobody's ever going to have infinity, right? And so, you know, you might have a nice car, but you don't have the car your friend does, right? Maybe you have a nice SUV and they just bought a nice convertible, but now you don't have a convertible. You know, you just took a nice vacation, but now your friend took a nice vacation to another place. Recent show I listened to was talking about how even some people are getting upset now because they picked to go on a trip or an experience with their friends. They made an affirmative choice to go there, and they said no to another experience. But then they're seeing the experience they missed out on Facebook, and they're feeling a loss. So there's no way you can be in two places at two times, but some of the world, the way it's happening now, is making people feel even more scarcity, because I guess they're more able to be aware of everything that's going on that they're not part of, and they feel like they're missing out.
I think it goes back to that sense of belonging. And I think essentially for me, what I see is that the constant cycle of scarcity comes from this need and the drive to belong or to be a part of.
Yes.
And that goes back to the layers of what I see as the layers of shame. When you're not living up to what is expected or what you deem is standard, you start to feel a story of lack. And that story of depletion creates this magnified feel that you never are enough and you're not going to be able to compete. And I do think that, like in the case where this child went off and went and shot at the school, it was because he was not allowed in the school. There was that withhold, that I'll show them kind of, mentality. I think in a lot of these cases, kids are feeling like there's no place to talk or no place to express what's going on for them. And, we can go look back in their society story as far as, they had no parents, they had, you can always find a why, but there's more to it, I think, as a society. I think the reason we see more of it in the workplace and we see it in, that story of lack, even street violence as a whole. I don't want to categorize street violence, but like just that story of why people join a tribe or a gang for better term. And that whole longing to belong and being a part of something still spins into this aspect of, not being a part of something. So you take action in your own hands and start trying to control the experience.
Yeah, well, I think the world has changed and it's continuing to evolve. But, if we go back, 150 years ago, if you lived in a different part of the country than your family, and people certainly moved, as part of the Western migration, other places, people lived in different areas than the people they had been raised with or they were socially connected with. You might send some letters back and forth. You might have some communication, but you didn't know what they were doing every day, right? You didn't say, oh, I just missed out on a dinner. And now with the way this telecommunication is working and the way the media is working, they make people feel like they're missing out on everything, even if they're part of something, right? They're part of a community, they're part of a neighborhood group, they have friends around them, they still feel like they're missing something. They feel like they can't be part of everything because they can't. But I think something different is happening now because the amount of media and other attention out there. You always feel like there's something that you're not part of because you keep getting snippets of all these other worlds shown to you.
So you're talking about inclusion versus exclusion, where people feel like they're not a part of that, like because of social media. You're saying it's amplified because of that?
Right. The social media and media in general, even traditional media, they show the Kardashians and they're on their fancy vacations and they're going to dinner or whatever they do. And you're not part of that. Huh?
The beautiful people experience.
The beautiful people, right? And you're not part of that by virtue of the fact that you're watching it on TV. You're probably not even in LA, right? You're in some other part of the country or the world and you're watching this. So you're already automatically excluded. You're already separated from it. And then now social media has sped it up and also personalized it, right? Now it's not some random person on TV having an experience that you'll never be part of. It's your friend having an experience that you'll never be part of. This is somebody who's now part of something that you're excluded from. So I think a lot of people struggle with that in trying to keep a balance, and people feel like they want to be part of things. They're socially connected to somebody. Now with social media, you can be socially connected with somebody and yet excluded from parts of their world, and it's thrown right in your face visually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also that just like what you're saying, you can rationalize certain elements, like the Kardashians. People know that that's just an exploited situation, and they chose that life to show their life that way. But I don't think we all want the Kardashians' lifestyle.
No.
I think it's more that they probably see that life, elements of their life that they may long to have because they relate or connect to them.
Yes.
But I don't think that that stimulates necessarily a scarcity to the level where they would go out and create some kind of criminal act. But I could be wrong. I mean,
not for most people. It's not going to rise to the level of criminal. I mean,
But I agree with you. There's a perpetuation of this story of lack. I agree with that.
It's creating more and more. The YouTube lady, right? We don't have all the information. There's some media reports coming out now, but she felt like she was entitled to more money than what she was getting paid by YouTube, right?
Because of what she was bringing to the community.
Right. She felt like she wasn't being treated fairly because she was looking apparently at what other people were getting from YouTube and their experiences and felt like she was being cheated.
See, but this is where I like I was saying, this is where I have an issue. Obviously there's probably more to the story than we'll ever
Sure.
know. But I see elements of like, where does the rational behavior come into play? Because in most people's minds, they're like, I'll take them to court.
Yeah.
I'll fight this with the law.
Right.
Where does this transition between I've been wronged, I'm going to take it by force in an unhealthy out of balance way into this, like this, there's an extreme step from going
Yes.
from I'm going to sue them to I'm going to shoot them,
Right.
and the same story with the kids, the children that have had experiences where they are severely feeling this extreme case of, negligence, or extreme case where they felt unsupported, where they felt that they needed to go in and take action into their own hands and do something about the story. I think that, a lot of, I remember when I was younger, do you remember the shooting, the postal shooting?
Mm-hmm.
Going postal actually became a
Yep.
thing for a while.
Yeah.
Which I'm not laughing at that, but I'm laughing at the fact that our society actually coined
Right.
a phrase over some horrifying
Yes.
experience. But the going postal concept is actually in our society almost now been glorified, and that's why I'm laughing about it, because it's like we went from a traumatic, horrifying experience to this. The way we dealt with our grief around it to something that was a little bit more, it's interesting.
That's an interesting parallel, and it's interesting because the American society and a lot of Western society, we favor action. We glorify people that get things done, right? And being a lawyer, lawyers were often the brunt of the jokes, and we're seen as zero value added a lot of times, and our clients get frustrated. And it's frustrating as a lawyer because you get brought into a court case, you spend a bunch of money, they spend a bunch of money, and you end up somewhere in the middle. So a lot of times the lawyers and the legal process is viewed as just a bunch of muck and paperwork. And so I think there's some subconscious stuff going on here where these people that go out and go postal or go shoot up a place or whatever, they get attention because they took action. They took wrongful action. They took bad action.
This is what I find to be right. You're saying right now, that to me is more the issue.
Yes.
Than that we actually publicize, or we make jokes, or we create glory in a situation that should not be glorious. And we create a lot of accentuated pain for people who are part of an experience that, they didn't choose to be in it. They were victims of the circumstance. So, I just, every time I think of the balance of, that energetic expression where they were wronged and they took an action.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that these people who take this kind of action aren't necessarily, they're I don't want to be rude. They're just not necessarily clear on healthier choices. Let's put it that way. And so in their minds, out of the anger and the lack of clarity, they take these actions that have such severe consequences in the long run. And then we use the media spins it to get ratings, or I don't even know really what the momentum is that really, because I don't claim to be an expert in that. But I recognize that our craze, our desire to know puts us in a cycle of that. Oh, I need to pause.
Right. Well, everybody, this behavior is obviously extreme, right? There's no doubt that going in and shooting up somewhere or harming other humans is extreme behavior. And most of these people that are doing it kind of when they're blaze of glory on the way out, right? The U2 lady was a suicide. A lot of the school shooting people end up either being suicides or getting gunned down. So there's kind of this final blaze of glory thing. But then people, a lot of people want answers. And, part of this is it's just irrational behavior, right? It's one person out of 300 and some million in the country that just did something crazy. So part of it is there may not be an answer. Or if there are answers, they're exceedingly complex and they're more than we're going to get in a 15-minute news story. Not that news stories even run 15 minutes anymore, right? In a 2-minute news clip, we're not going to get to the societal causes and the structures and, the deep-rooted issues that can lead to something like this, because it's so many different factors. I mean, it's values, it's education, it's mental health issues, it's societal issues. There are numerous issues that can lead to something happening like this, but it doesn't lend itself to that quick hit on the media. So the media comes in, we're talking about the big national media. They come in, they do their quick pieces to get people's eyeballs on a TV screen so they can sell more commercials.
So, the other thing that you're just bringing up that's really, I think, is so fascinating and talks about kind of to the tone of scarcity within the news. It always amazes me what stories end up being put in the news to the level that they get put in. Like, let's talk about war for just a minute. You think about all the actions of criminal law and the criminal behavior that happen within, say, in, war.
Yep.
There's so much going on there on a day-to-day basis that we don't know about. But why do certain stories actually get airtime over other ones? It's amazing to me. There's crime everywhere in the US.
Yes.
You can be in the sweetest, cutest little town and a murder's happened. Part of, connection and part of controversy, it's all that community work, right? But why do certain elements get such recognition? And I used to think it was because, like say a school shooting, it was children behaving like adults, taking action, taking lives of another, such a out of the left field. But, we've had a couple of them now, and I hate to say it that way, but it does seem to be like the momentum got accelerated by literally it being viewed on the news. And I don't know if that's just to say that, but it seems like it does accentuate it, or maybe I'm just more sensitive to it because I saw it.
No, I think my working theory on this is we've got a very fragmented media, right? There's no doubt anymore that we're getting more and more into small media, right? And I even was listening to some people the other day talking about the fact that we're getting almost to the point where we have two sets of media. We have the Republican media and we have the Democratic media in the U.S. And we tend to get closer and closer to that point. But we've gone to micro media and channels in general. I mean, it's our entertainment. We talked about the Kardashians earlier, right? Some people tune into that, and some people tune into the Alaska gold diggers, and some people tune into, everybody's got their own channel, right? 150, 200 channels on your cable channel, and you probably only watch 5 of them. That's what most people do. You're not tuning around, you're watching the same shows. So you've got your little tiny segment of the world. Somebody else got their little tiny segment of the world. But what I think happens with these types of things is once it becomes popular enough, one media channel starts using that as a hook to try to get you onto their media channel. So because we have so many different media channels now, if there's a global story or a story that's of wide importance in the country, one media channel can run a snippet and a soundbite to try to drag you into their media channel that grows their base. So what's interesting is even though we have all this different media, they're still working very interdependent on each other because they're trying to steal customers and steal leads and steal viewers from each other.
They also try to take the polar controversial perspective to create more drama. I hate to say it, but I've watched
create more drama.
One station will say one thing and another station will say another, and you're like, okay, so what is the truth? Nobody knows the truth. It's all perceptive.
Well, that's the other thing that's changed, and I feel like this has changed a lot, is now we argue over the facts. We used to argue over what the right position was, what politically we should do with it, but everybody seemed to generally agree on what the facts were. Now we have to start at square one, right? We have to argue over what the facts are because one group has one set of facts, another group has another set of facts, which is partially the ease of creating fake stories on the internet and with some of these small media channels. Now you can just create facts and run it, and it may take people days or weeks to figure out the fact that you lied about the fact. But we're starting at a whole different place now. Before we knew what the facts were, and we just argued over how we should work with the facts. Now we're arguing over what the facts are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think you see a lot more of that breakdown in law than I would. I see emotional attachments. I see where people get invested in their perception of the truth or their perception of the facts, and they really don't know the facts because they're seeing it through their perception.
Oh, don't
Facts
get me
are
wrong.
not Yeah. What's that?
Don't get me wrong, that does happen in law
Yeah.
all the time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of a running joke with lawyers. You get on a call, even get on a call with a lawyer on the other side of the matter, and they're like, "Well, your client's told you that, my client's told me this, and the truth's probably somewhere in the middle." And there's a lot
Right.
of truth to that. It may not even be intentional misstatement by either of our clients. It's just they've seen the world from their set of
From their
perspective,
lens. Yeah.
and the and there is no, generally there's no third party observer, right? It's just one story against the other story
Well,
to
and the
judge.
third party observer has their own filters, so you're not
Right.
dealing with a third perception. You
Well,
know,
and I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but there's some billions of pieces of data that are coming at us every second as humans, right? We can't listen to every sound, we can't watch everything. Our
we can't
eyes zoom in on
possibly.
little,
We can't
right?
possibly.
So our brain has already pre-filtered before we even start perceiving, pre-filtered, and then a different subset that actually gets remembered and recorded. So
True.
we as humans are not great at recording perception and recording facts down anyway.
That's very true. Yeah. Yeah. So say if this was in the court, the
Yep.
situation, and you were defending, let's put you in the hot seat. Let's put you in a situation where you're defending, say, the actual person who did the shooting. How
Yep.
would you protect them? What would you do to help people understand their experience?
Yeah, I mean, the legal system, in criminal law is interesting because we do have this burden beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So that's where you got to take somebody to.
Yeah, because they're innocent until
But
proven guilty, not guilty
innocent till
first.
proven guilty, and then beyond that, not and you're innocent till proven guilty, so you got this presumption of innocence, and then you've got to take them beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So there has to be a doubt for which there can't be a doubt for which there's a reason. A person would not find a reason to doubt whatever the conviction is. Now, in these shootings, it's, a lot of times you've got film of the person shooting, you've got third party testimony, you've got a pretty good case. The only out you really have at that point, and in most states you have to say, okay, I did it, and then you go for some type of defense of insanity or lack of criminal responsibility.
Right.
And that's a whole other boat where you've got to say this person was basically mentally ill such that they didn't understand what they were doing and they didn't understand the criminal consequences of it. And those standards vary a lot. I mean, that's going to be your best avenue if you're trying to defend somebody like that. It's a very difficult thing to defend, but and I honestly think that, and you can see it in their behavior, the people who are doing this aren't going in to defend themselves. They're not trying to justify it. They know they're doing something illegal. They know they're going to get killed at the end of it, but they want to make a statement. They want to make an
Do you think
impact.
they really think beyond the experience? I personally don't see people acting or thinking beyond the anger itself. Like, I don't see them contemplating, okay, well, if I go in and shoot people, I'll probably end up dead. I don't think they really think that far ahead.
Well, so many of them kill themselves at the end rather than get
Yeah,
caught.
but that's because they have no out. Don't
They
you
put
think?
themselves in a situation where they're going to get shot and killed. I think a lot of them go in knowing how it's going to end, but they want to inflict harm, pain, it's rage. They don't care about their life. And
So,
rather than, quietly go commit suicide somewhere, they say, we're going to take some people out on the way down. And I see that threat in a lot of these.
I see from my perspective and the people that I've worked with over time, because I being my background being more in the emotional aspect, I see people react versus respond. I don't see them in a place where they're actually processing their pain. All they know is that they're hurting and they want to express the hurt. They want to get rid of the pain. And they're not literally going, I'm going to die anyway. I'm going to take them down with me. I've yet to see somebody actually say that to me. For the most part, I always hear, I'm hurting so bad, I just want it to stop.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, I don't care as long as I'm not hurting anymore. I think this with my suicidal, people have come to me that have had suicidal thoughts or intensities of any kind. Their mindset is, this is unbearable. Anything's better than this. So I feel like some people go internal with this behavior and some people go external. And I feel like for the most part, what we're talking about is people who have scarcity on an external level. They're feeling the sense of lack outside of themselves,
Yep.
they're going to take the lack and take it back to become whole in their perspective.
Right.
But unfortunately, I think a lot of them get to a situation and they're like, I have no idea how I got here, or whatever. I don't even know if that's a proper way of thinking of it. I've watched so many people, me be their last hope or their last call out to something different.
Yep.
And I'm grateful to be in that space, because the truth is, what they do if they don't have that space could be the end of their life or somebody else's.
Sure.
And that is something you have to value. You have to put a level of respect around that. But also, like what we really wanted to talk about today, and I got totally derailed on it, but gun laws. Like, how do we keep people who are in a space where they're wanting to express? Now, I personally believe that if there was not the gun, it would have been something. We've got acid splashing in other countries. You've got knife stabbings. There's, if harm is going to happen, I don't necessarily think that guns are the reason for the harm, but I definitely think that we should probably be more accountable for how accessible it is, and some safety behaviors. Like, I almost think that this sounds really kind of like crazy and maybe even not even possible, because maybe it's against the our rights. Who knows? You'll have to tell me this. But I almost wonder if by doing certifications or deep testing for gun laws, where they actually have to do like a psychiatric kind of assessment. And I kind of tiptoe around this because I don't necessarily think that all psychiatric assessments are actually accurate. I don't think we've even gotten close to being able to understand the layers of neuroses, and labeling somebody something I don't think is necessarily helpful either. But I'm curious if somebody wants a gun, to maybe even asking more questions of, why do you want the gun? Why do you feel unsafe? Why is it this gun you chose? What is it about this gun that attracts you? Understanding the whys, I think, might help us understand better how they intend to have it. Like, is there an intention or a risk of this individual? I don't know. That's kind of like very, again, like I said, it's probably pushing against all the rights of
it pushes a host of legal issues, because then obviously on the flip side of this, you've got to have some government employee who's going to review this and
check this box, check that box,
and they've got to make a yes or no decision, and they've got to do it in a fair and objective way, right? I mean, that's one thing we know in the U.S. is we generally expect people to be treated the same. You have that right to due process. So, whatever the answers are to the, why questions you ask, if one person answers them one way and another person answers them similarly, they're both supposed to get the same result. And so that requires work on the government side, right? They've got to come up with a process and a procedure to say what are correct answers and what are not correct answers.
Right.
And then that starts becoming complicated, because that becomes a human judgment of, well, what's a proper reason for wanting a gun? What's not a proper reason for wanting a gun? See how that instantly becomes very, very complex and very subjective. Somebody has to make a yes or no decision. And that's tricky in the U.S. And I think we could do it to some extent, but it would have to be done in a process that was fair and impartial. And we might filter out some of the people in the process, because some people may not go through the process because of the questions.
The intimidation factor.
Right, because they're afraid to answer the questions. Or, they may not be able to work through all the questions in a logical fashion in such a way that somebody on the other end could see that there was an inconsistency or something was wrong about, type of gun they were purchasing versus the use of the gun versus, all the explanations. They may not add up.
So here's the reason I ask this. My girlfriend was just sharing with me recently. She's studying for certification for financial advisor or some kind of, I'm not sure exactly what the term is. But anyway, she had to go through an extensive background check, like intense. And any bump or bubble or any question of, behavioral issues, she had to answer to those. And part of me wonders, why the heck do we not have that on the gun laws too? Like, why isn't it that some of those things, I mean, we're talking about financial, I mean, it's advising people about money. And doesn't the gun ultimately affect someone outside of yourself, just like the financial realm, you know, like your
Yeah. I
advice
mean,
or your actions?
we certainly have licenses out there that have very high standards to them. You know, the financial advisors, the attorneys, a lot of
Doctors,
securities licenses. Yeah, I mean, you're talking, you know, it's not unusual for an attorney application in a given state to be a 100-page document. You know, list every address you've lived at since you were 18.
yeah,
You know, and what's interesting though with them, and I think part of this is because of where we are in the U.S. system, is, you know, they don't necessarily send you in for a mental health screening, but they ask you if you've had any visits to a mental health professional, that kind of stuff. So they're looking for it, but they can't really ask the questions in a certain way.
hmm
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we have more extensive background checks,
that's
you know,
what I was thinking about when
for
this
an
whole thing.
attorney or a financial advisor who generally could only, you know, you could really impact somebody's life by messing up their legal case, or, you know,
Yes,
by mismanaging their money. But those are generally financial losses,
and
and
recoverable.
and recoverable generally.
Or you
Yes,
accidentally shoot somebody, it may not be recoverable.
absolutely, right.
You
I mean,
know,
that's a one-time deal, right?
and I'm sure each state's laws are different, and you know what they see in each state, I'm sure, is different. But there's just it's a very interesting thought of what if we did have a uniform standard that was asked of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, and you're right. Absolutely, the states vary greatly. I mean, my understanding is the gun courses, from the little bit I've studied it, you know, they vary from being a few hours, you know, something to do in half a day, up to a couple of days.
Wow.
But you know, we're less
How
than
long is
probably what you
average?
spent.
How long is the average driver's ed these days? Do we know?
I don't know these days. I mean, I recall it being many evenings back when I did it.
I
You know,
know, right?
I had to
I'm gonna
keep
do.
getting
I'm
dropped
gonna do the
off, right? Because
research.
you can't drive the driver's ed, right? So I had to get driven
Get
to
dropped
driver's,
off. Yeah, that's
dropped off, and then a few hours later you get picked up, and you know, watching old videos of, you know, cars and car wrecks and all that kind of stuff, you know. So
I'm gonna look it up. Driver's ed.
yeah, so I mean, you know, you spent a lot of hours in the classroom to get to drive a car, and then you had to drive the car with, you know, where I grew up, you had to drive a car with a supervisor, somebody that, you know, rode in the other seat with a brake pedal, make sure you weren't going to wreck the car. And only after you did all of that, then they sent you in for another test. You took your actual test, and then you got your license, right? So a lot of instruction, a lot of supervised instruction. Whereas guns, I haven't seen that as much.
Yeah, see, part of me wonders, do we have the same policies? I guess each state again is different on this too.
Each
This is
state's
funny.
different, but you
My,
know,
but
state's not familiar.
even in driver's license, it's different. So I'm
Yeah,
not going to get a straight answer. Um, but this is interesting. You know, it's kind of interesting that we don't have a standardized process, because we can drive over one state border to another. You would
yeah.
think that there would be a standard. I guess it's not.
No. That's been a federal thing for a while. In the states, you know, they, even the gun licenses, many of the states recognize other states' gun licenses. So some people potentially can carry guns across state lines.
I know here, my kids for driver's ed,
Yeah.
they didn't have to take class. They just had to pass the driver's ed permit and have us X amount of hours behind the wheel before they took the driver's test.
Oh, really? Okay.
I sent them to driver's ed.
Okay. Yeah. I
I
mean,
personally feel like there was so much to learn there. It was such a great opportunity.
yeah. Maryland, we it was dependent on how old you were. So if you want to get your license when you were 16, you know, you had to go through the class. If you waited until you were 18, I think you could avoid some of that.
Interesting, really.
Yeah. So if you're a little bit older, they gave you a little more trust, I guess.
Same day permits. I guess I got to get you practicing right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they all vary from state to state. Funny. Interesting. I
Yeah.
thought it was more nationally standardized, but I guess not.
No. I think driver's licenses has been a state law function for a long time, and now we're letting gun licenses be a statewide function. And you know, but there is a real question of what should the states be doing with that function. And are we asking enough questions? Is it comprehensive? I can certainly say, what I'm familiar with, the education I've had is not, it's not comprehensive. It's, very cursory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of states it's half a day to 2 days, which, depending on who walks in the door, if you've been handling guns,
Since you were
uh,
13,
if you've been handling guns, yeah, exactly. Your whole life on your
you have
private
been
property,
living
you don't
on,
have,
out in the boonies. Gun was a
yeah,
way of birth.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, if that was where you grew up, then a 4 hour
I'm a
class might be
Midwestern
enough.
girl, so yeah, too
Yeah.
funny.
If you never seen a gun before, 4 hours probably isn't going to be enough to get you over the hump.
Yeah, yeah. And then I remember when I was younger, because I grew up in Chicago, northwest suburbs, so not in the city, but
Yep.
I remember that they used to tell us all the time that owning a gun's not necessarily going to protect you, because if you're not strong enough, it could be used against you. I still
Yeah.
think that's a very true statement. I think that, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in, I'm not a policeman, but at the
Right.
same time, I could see that that would be a very true stance. If you don't have the confidence to pull the trigger, you should probably not be pulling a gun out in the first place.
Oh,
But
I think that can be a common problem. I mean, if you and police are drilled, right? I mean, they're drilled to pull their gun in certain situations, how close to get to people, how to cover it. You'll notice I walked past a policeman on the street the other day, and he reached up and he put his hand on top of his gun, right? I mean, this is what they're trained to do, right? So, and it was a fairly busy street. There were a lot of people around. I just walked past the guy, and he reached up and stuck his hand over top of his gun because he's taught, you cover your gun. You don't want some random person running by and grabbing the gun out of your holster, right? But that's training and drilling that requires time and attention to get to that level. And so, the question is, and I don't know, are most people trained and drilled sufficiently to handle a gun in that type of situation? I don't know. I mean, I question that. I think, a lot of people I know that own guns, they might go to the shooting range once in a while for some fun or whatever, but they're not training and drilling at that level. The guy that taught one of the gun course I took, like he would run drills with his family of what they would do in the case of a home invasion. The guy was very serious and very safety oriented. Now, people that handle it that way, that's a different category, but people are getting licenses that don't necessarily do that kind of work, right? And I think a gun's a lot of responsibility, and if you're going to have it, what are we doing to make sure people are doing the work? I got to take my car in every year here in Texas to get inspected, right? The state looks over it, makes sure my blinkers are working and I'm not polluting and whatever else they check when you get your car inspected. Your seatbelts are still there. But these gun licenses, it seems like you get them one time and you got it, and you don't have to go back and make sure that you're still on top of your game, but yet you still have this very deadly instrument with you.
wow, what a great piece there. What a great conversation that is.
Yeah.
Upkeep and maintenance, like, of your education, and even
Right.
mental. See,
I mean, as a lawyer, I got to go back to school, it depends on the state. I'm licensed in multiple states, but somewhere between 12 and 15 hours a year on average, I have to be, continuing my education as a lawyer. I have to be learning new stuff as a lawyer or refreshing in order to keep my license, right? And
right.
that's part of having a license. But I have not seen the same type of thing with the gun licenses,
Mm,
at least the ones I'm familiar with. When you grew up in the Chicago area, I grew up in the Baltimore area. These are two states which are not very pro-gun,
mm.
and so you're talking about guns being an unusual thing, and now having lived in the South a lot more, I meet a lot of people where guns are
Out
a
at the
part of life.
restaurant.
Right, exactly. It's part of life, right? It's expected. So that is a fundamental issue, right? I mean, some people view guns as being everyday life, and some people view them as being extraordinarily different and unusual. But we're all in this country together, so we've got to figure out some balance or some way to work through it because we have these different viewpoints and these different experiences.
I feel like the element of what you're talking about there is to have a common understanding. it's not changing the way it's being done, more so having a general understanding, like our education, for example. We all go, hopefully, through to high school, get a GED saying you know this much knowledge.
Right.
I feel like it should be the same thing when it comes to owning a car, owning a gun, getting married. I personally think you should know more about marriage before you get married, but because they're going to help with our divorce rate. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that the more education you have around the understanding of the experience, the better educated you can behave within it. And I feel like that we lose the ownership or accountability when we start go, yeah, I've got a gun, you know, it's like exciting. Well, okay, that's great.
I mean, it's a sport, you know, it's like a lot of other sports. You can, you know, it's a skill, right? And there's people that shoot guns in the Olympics, right? I mean, you know, they have, you know, sports that are around that. And so, yeah, I mean, it can be something you can drill, something you can train in. I can see how that would be a recreational thing.
Yeah. For some, it really is.
But
I mean, that's their weekend family fun thing that, you know, I live in Arizona now, so it is a little bit more of a social family activity, and it's really interesting.
Right, exactly. You go out
Wild
and
West.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a different view to it. So, you know, and then the question is how, you know, back to the original point of scarcity. I mean, how scarce do you make guns? And I think that's part of this conversation, right? Is what standards do we apply to being able to get them or not get them? And I don't think there's been a lot of discussion about it. It's been a couple of laws that have been put in, you know, in reactionary standards with background checks and other things. But nobody's really stopped and done the comprehensive discussion, you know, and nobody stopped.
When you go into that discussion, the first thing that pops into my head is you look at countries that have strict gun laws. In the crime rate is significantly down according to statistics, as far as I'm sure they do it based on types of crime. But there's still, like I was saying earlier, there's still other opportunities. If there's an action of anger, usually it's getting expressed. They're going to take some kind of action. So what I was thinking when you were bringing up the restriction of, you know, of guns itself, I almost think then you kind of put things in a pressure cooker situation where, because this form of scarcity, we're making the desire and the need, because you're being told I can't, even more amplified.
Well, there's definitely been that going on in the U.S., and that's been a longer standing phenomenon. I mean, there are people out there that have been stockpiling guns and ammunition and other stuff because they're concerned about access to it in the future. So in some way, you've kind of created, because of scarcity, you've created now this fear that there's going to be a future scarcity. So people are stockpiling now. There's no doubt there's been some element of that going on. And then, of course, you know, one of the longer range problems in the U.S. is if you really restricted guns in the future, you've got such a large base that's already out there. You know, that the stuff that's already been manufactured isn't going to magically disappear overnight, and it's going to be there for potentially for a very long time. You can't just flip that switch off and say, okay, all the guns are gone, because there's a large pool of guns that are already out there on the streets and owned by people.
But you even look at, like, this, let's look in our history, and we have, you know, the prohibition, you know, like people are still drinking anyway.
Oh, I mean, it was fairly
even recent to the pot, you know, people were doing pot illegally. That didn't stop them.
Oh, this is a country where people, you know, tend to pick and choose laws. This is a very legalistic country, you know, as a lawyer, but then there's a lot of laws that people tend to look the other way about. You know?
Gray laws.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, prohibition was one of the prime examples. You know, now with the marijuana, some of the recreational drugs, there's a lot of people out there that, you know, I don't partake, but there's people out there that think it's not that big of a deal, right? Whatever. And they think, you know, that it's one of the laws you don't really follow, you know, and it's kind of like, you know, jaywalking, you know, I mean, people jaywalk all the time, right? I mean, it's a law, yes, they know they're breaking the law, but it's like, that's not a law that really matters, you know. And so
okay, this reminds me of a funny story. I guess I'm a rule follower, I admit it. I was on a date, and I was walking with this gentleman across the street, and he looks at me and goes, "You gonna be really upset if we walk across the street?" I'm like, "Oh, you mean the fact that we're jaywalking?" And he goes, "Yeah." My hands up. I'm like, "Boy, is it that obvious?"
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? So I had to laugh when you brought that up. I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm kind of one of those."
Yeah, and I mean that is an interesting thing when you get a group of people like, that dynamic, it's so common in the US that, you don't know, if you pull a group of
Well,
people
if
together, it's
you live
probably
in
25% frequently jaywalk,
Well, if
or
you
50.
live in California, you get ticketed. If you live anywhere else, you don't. But maybe in certain states, I don't know about other states. I shouldn't say that. But I do know my thing is the reason I follow it is because I know it's there to protect me. It's not because they're trying to control me. And I think it's a different
Right.
perspective. Like I know that drivers driving who are on their cell phone texting while they're driving, or
Yeah.
just looking down for a brief minute, they're not going to expect me walking across the street.
Yep.
They're gonna
Yep.
be stopping at a stoplight because that's natural and intuitive.
Yes.
And yeah, I guess I kind of do follow the rules too.
Okay. So you're a rule follower, and there's,
Pretty much.
yeah, I
I'm
follow those.
guilty. I think that there's just a lot to be said about the rules are there to save us, not necessarily to, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's a fundamental thing that goes back to the founding of this country. Is how heavy should the rules be, and how much should the rules protect us versus our individual risk? And to be honest,
It's hard.
the framers of the Constitution didn't agree. Right? We compromised on a lot of stuff. This country was. The United States was largely a shotgun marriage that got pushed through, and we're still seeing the effects of it now, 200 plus years later.
Well, I laugh even the fact that like some of those rules and policies, they don't even apply to today's lifestyle. We've modified them to make them work, but we are
Yeah.
so not, riding horseback anymore.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. The world has evolved very, very quickly.
In a very short period of time. Yeah.
Yeah, but yet so many of these traditions are the same, and things are different. And we're in a new era, right? I mean, if it's not guns, it's we got bombs, we've got acid attacks, which have gotten frequent in some of the foreign countries. There could be arson. I mean, there could be a lot of different ways somebody could express themselves in a negative way beyond just grabbing a gun. And so we've got to, keep that in mind, that, whatever we think the right balance is on gun control, there's other stuff out there that's still available, and we're never going to lock it all down. As hard as we try, you're not going to lock down everything that can potentially be made into a bomb. There's a lot of innocent materials that can be converted into bombs. And now in cyber attack now, right? I mean, who knows how far we get with that in the future? That's a whole nother avenue where somebody can potentially inflict harm with somebody just through a computer.
Yes.
Substantial harm,
Yeah. And on that, let's wrap it up.
Okay.
There's a whole nother conversation coming out of that one.
Whole other conversation.
I am grateful for us getting together and discussing some scarcity, especially around all this gun violence lately. And I know it's been we all have our own independent thoughts and feelings around these issues. And as we continue to explore some of this, we're going to have some special guests come and join us in the next couple weeks or couple months here, and get their opinion and their perspective from the stance of gun laws and the ongoing trend of, I hate to say it, but, publicized violence. And I think it's very, very important for us to at least have a conversation about it. Whether you agree with us or disagree, it doesn't matter. We all have our individual rights and our individual freedoms. And the whole point is to have the discussion so that we can start to understand and connect and support each other in our individual unique beliefs.
Yes, I think there's a general lack of talk about information these days, and a lack of talk about the fundamental pinnings, and so much about the outcome and the result. And hopefully we have a chance here to have a conversation about a very tough and deep topic, but in a meaningful way that will educate everybody, and we can see other people's points of views.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.